We're going to be talking about all things somewhat supernatural. Perhaps you may want to think of it that way, but maybe not. In a moment, Jeff Grupp is back with us. He was with me back in 2011, and we'll be talking about things like dark ecstasy. Now, you're saying, what is that? Well, how about crystal gazing? Well, we'll talk about that, too, when we come back on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back to Coast. Jeff Grupp with us now. Jeff, of course, is what they call a radical academic. He is a former college teacher at Grand Valley, Western Michigan, Purdue, Indiana U, where he taught philosophy, and more specifically Eastern philosophy, ethics, metaphysics, Buddhism as well. And Jeff, I've aged 4 years since you were last on with me. I can't believe how fast time goes by.
Yeah, no kidding, George. It's great to be back with you. I'm very happy. Hope you've been doing well.
Yeah, everything's fine. Family's good. I did lose my sister.
Sorry to hear that.
She had stage 4 brain cancer, but what a fighter she was, Jeff. I'm convinced it's the cell phones, but that's, I don't think I'm not alone with that. So how about yourself? What's going on with you?
Oh, can't complain at all, George. Really doing better than ever, I'd say. Doing a lot of good research. Family's doing good. Happy to be on the show with you. I'm back in the conspiracy radio and research world again. I sort of took 3 years off. I just hit it really hard from 2007 to 2011, and I needed some time to sit back and just process all the information that had been swirling around in my mind for those 5 years. And I taught for a couple of years at U of Michigan Dearborn, that is. And
my mother lives right up the street from where you were teaching.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
A wonderful place to teach, by the way. And yeah, now I'm back in with some new research, and a lot of things have changed this year, and it's great to be back in the scene. This is kind of where I feel always at home in this arena.
Tell everybody, Jeff, a little bit about yourself beyond just the bio.
Oh, okay. I'm a Christian. I became a Christian this year, actually. I'm a musician. Really. Being a philosopher is sort of a around the clock for me. I'm a September 11 birthday, and if anybody knows anything about that numerologically, that's the information freak.
That's
somebody
right.
who just is sitting there thinking about every little tidbit of information from moment to moment, and doing that, you can put together certain kinds of connections and notice certain things that I think the average person doesn't really. If you're stuck in a cubicle or you're not looking at the mechanics of what your mind's doing from moment to moment or what your life's doing, and if you're not an information freak, you might miss out on certain things. And I've been sort of fortunate through the years to pick up certain tidbits of information that I think not only others haven't, but I think some that even haven't really been discovered. I picked up some things in numerology the last say 2 years or so. That I think that I've really noticed loud and clear, and I've told friends about them, and they were, oh no, that doesn't make sense. And then they started to observe the same things going on in their life, and they're now believers.
It's almost like you buy a car, and then all of a sudden you see that car everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah. When you've got an appetite for the weird or for the conspiratorial or the supernatural, you'll start to notice it. If you don't have an appetite for it, you won't notice that stuff. That's why when somebody has a lot of you find someone who's seen, they've seen a ghost, and then they've had all these other experiences, and you say, well, why do all those happen to you and not just, and I don't have anything happen to me? Well, the answer is because where your mind is looking. If you're not looking for something, you might not see it.
Indeed. Now, you have a concept you call dark ecstasy, and I want you to explain it because only you can.
Yeah. Which I don't know if that's good or bad. This is something back in my previous conspiracy theory research days back in 2007 to 2011, did a lot of work on this. And back at that time, I thought it was a certain kind of mental state. Well, it is a certain kind of mental state where a human can find a certain kind of euphoria or even a high off of usually what people would consider are the most horrific acts. A good example is one that people can readily understand would be real sadomasochism, that the sexual ritual. I've never I don't know much about it just other than books and so forth, but that's apparently a widespread phenomenon, little discussed, but in that you're using sexuality to generate pain. And this is something that actually, George, is the result is a certain kind of ecstasy. Now, I know this, believe it or not, this is also found in religion as well, where you put yourself in pain in certain ways so you can achieve certain states of ecstasy. The shaman goes out into the Arctic and meditates and subjects himself to or herself to
horrendous conditions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so pain is actually something that is really good for the spiritual life in a lot of ways. In the end, pain ultimately doesn't even exist. A lot of people are like, what did that guy just say? Well, no, try it. Go poke yourself in the arm with a pencil or something, and it'll hurt really bad. But if you focus in on the pain, and look at it, and look at it, so to speak, and feel it as deeply as you can, instead of looking away from it. If you're looking right into it, there's no pain anymore. You just feel a sensation. I've had, when I was teaching, I used to have students that would, get these big tattoos all across their back and so forth. And then, they took my philosophy class and they knew, what we just said about it, that pain ultimately in the end is just a sort of perspective that can be shifted where it doesn't have to exist in the mind. And they go into the tattoo parlor and get these huge tattoos over their back, and then the tattoo artist says, "Wow, I can't believe you didn't even flinch. I've never seen anything like this. What's the secret?"
I'm the same way. I've got an amazingly high pain threshold to a point where, doctors have, when they jab you and, and pin you and everything else, they say, you don't move. This is amazing. But it's state of mind, Jeff.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, dark ecstasy is a sort of different. I don't want to compare that necessarily. I don't want to say it's different or necessarily say it's the same as what we just said with the shaman or any other religion that we could bring up. But dark ecstasy, I now think I've thought about this. This has been amazing. I actually had a dark ecstasy episode in my life. That's why I came up with the concept. It was from 1997 to 99 when I lived in New Mexico, and I now recognize it. Not just a sort of mental state, but I think now it was some sort of a demon possession or satanic attack or something. Yeah, that's. I was a student and doing a lot of studying and so forth, and I was a very intense atheist and evolutionist, and I don't know how it happened. But I started to just, I think it was, some part of me thinks it has to do with all the Buddhist meditation I was doing. I'm not saying anything negative about Buddhism, but I think somehow or another my mind shifted in a way to where I was really susceptible to, there's a spirit world out there. If you doubt that, go eat a bunch of peyote and sit in the closet for a while, and you'll see loud and clear there's a spiritual world all around us that is very alive and well all the time, and it has a lot more influence on our lives than we might guess. But somehow, I still actually, George, don't know how it happened, but all of a sudden in 1997, I just kind of got really weird, and it really escalated all the way until 99. And I started to, in 99, I started to see spiritual beings of very dark nature. And I think that the reason I did, you might say, well, why didn't you realize that something's wrong? Go see a doctor or something. And the answer, George, is because it felt good. It was a type of ecstasy. Now, if you want to know the type of consciousness I'm talking about, go rent the movie, or actually, I don't rent movies anymore. Go get the movie The Omen. In the beginning portions of that movie is the most, I don't know if I want to say wonderful, but it really illustrates the dark ecstasy consciousness well. It's actually a pretty good movie. The Exorcist and The Omen are two horror films that really sort of, I think, have good information value in them, not just, a scare tactic horror film or something. But anyways, in The Omen, you see this woman at the beginning of the film. All of a sudden, she realizes that somehow she comes in contact with this little boy she's around is a demon or is the devil or something. So she goes up on top of the building and she performs a theatrical. The point is, it's a theatrical display of where she kills herself right in front of this nice little afternoon dinner party that people are having in their lawn. And the point is that her expression on her face and the way she says, "Damien, this is all for you," and then she jumps off and as she hangs herself, and you're like, what was the point of that? And the point is that when you're in the dark ecstasy consciousness, there's a very specific set of traits that come over a person that are they're you can almost when I was doing the work with all this research in dark ecstasy back in 2007 to 2011, I found a lot of other people. I ran a radio show back then. A lot of listeners sort of gravitated to the show, and I found out that a lot of them had the same kind of sort of demonic attacks or whatever it was, and they would say, yeah, there's this very specific set of traits that would come along. Like one is you love to be think about suicide. Another one is you love nihilism. Like if you've ever seen that movie Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
oh, sure.
The one with Matthew McConaughey. I can't remember what name it is. It's been so long since I've seen it. Or the movie Crash by David Cronenberg. Those sort of illustrate the pure nihilism that we're talking about. And so like I was saying, you might wonder why you didn't notice all this going on, but because you sort of feel smarter, and you really, it does kind of this state of consciousness, this whatever it exactly is, you do sort of feel a high. I've read in books about serial killers that are dissecting, it's, I don't know if this is really, it's kind of the intense subject matter here for Coast to Coast, but, with the serial killers, when they're doing their dissection rituals and stuff, some of them will report feeling a sort of real high. And I know there's that TV show Dexter, which I've actually seen a couple episodes of.
I used to watch that a lot. I liked that.
Yeah, it's a pretty good show, actually. But you'd notice that he would sort of, he never really says it, I don't think, but his mannerisms would sort of express a high or something right at the point of his own little personal ritual murder ceremony. So there's a lot of this, and I've known students that have been in intense warfare, and man, George, I'm telling you, I can see it right in their face. They're confused. They don't know why they're feeling all these feelings, and they've got the dark ecstasy consciousness brewing in them somehow or another. It's this. Some of the other traits to do with it are you develop this obsession with deformity. And there's an artist called Joel Peter Witkin from Albuquerque. Actually, when I lived in Albuquerque, I was going to look him up during my dark ecstasy days. But his artwork, go look that up. Witkin is Witkin, and he's a really famous artist, and the art is just all basically of corpses that are, he's done things to them, cut some of them in half and done various things to make artwork. And you're thinking, who would like this? Well,
I would say, who would go see that?
Well, there's a different kind of mental state that all people are susceptible to. You got to kind of think of the ancient Mayan ball game. When the ancient Mayans would have that ritual ball game where, apparently, from my understanding of it, everybody would get pretty loaded up on psilocybin mushrooms down there in the rainforest, and it sort of lose their mind, and you could fall into a suicidal ritual. A lot of people would perform the chakpa ritual, which is where you do a self-decapitation. And you think, well, why would this be the case? But the point is that it's always a sort of an artwork. Like the people that would be performing the chakra ritual would be down in the arena, and then those, they would do it for the onlookers in the stands who were purportedly juiced up on intense psychedelics as well. I'm not saying there's a lot of shamanic ritual stuff that use psychedelics. I'm not saying that they can be used for productive purposes or for negative is what I'm saying. But then I've heard like a lot of the elites out there, I've sort of traced through the years when they buy certain artwork, and I'm saying I see it, and I'm saying, man, that is exactly looks like some Joel Peter Witkin art or something. And why would they have interest in that? And then you wonder, well, is it possible that we live in a strange world here, an Illuminati world of some sort, and you wonder if there's not some people pulling the strings behind it all that aren't susceptible to a satanic, demonic
Jeffrey,
attack of some sort.
What about the artwork with that individual who has cadavers set up at art shows? And
yeah, exactly.
People just flock to that.
Yeah, when you hear about the big time artists that are, get $100,000 or $200,000 for some kind of, deformity art, you got to look at what it is and why it's going for so much, and who's the one who's bought it. And it's sort of revealing. You see this trend over and over and over and over. It kind of reminds me how often you'll hear about, the supermodel was, some people in high places sometimes will often be found doing strange things like torturing animals or certain things. There's a lot going. There's a whole different world. My thesis is that the world that we live in is a spiritual world, and there's some sort of spiritual warfare going on, and you can fall. Let me explain this. This is actually pretty interesting. Let me explain it more than just the trite way that it's usually explained.
Please.
You can fall on either side. Now think about your mind, George, your consciousness. Most people don't take a moment and look at their consciousness. Really, maybe ever in their whole life, a lot of people won't do that, which is sort of amazing because that's supposedly where you are, where your self is. So why doesn't, I mean, but if you do though, let's say take a quiet moment when you're in the shower or you're mowing the lawn or something, try to really look at your mind and see what it's doing sometime, and don't go in there and look at it and try to find out what you're expecting to find. Go back passively, like you're sitting back looking at the clouds floating by or something, and just see what's in there, and you find some really amazing stuff going on. Namely, there are thoughts and feelings and visualizations flitting and flashing through your mind like lightning, and you're thinking to yourself, I'm not putting these things here. I mean, I'm not sitting back and using my deliberation, using my free will and saying, okay, now I will bring this thought into my consciousness and have this one exit, and now I'll have the next one come in and the next one exit. And you're not doing that. They're coming and going, and you're almost sitting back watching them like you're in a movie theater, and you're thinking, now, who am I? Am I the looker of all these things going on in my mind, or are some of these things part of me? And it's almost like things are being put in your mind. I mean, most people don't look at their consciousness, so you don't have any idea what I'm talking about. But if you do, this is what you see. A lot of philosophers like David Hume have written about this, and you say you go and look inside your consciousness and try to find the self. You don't really find the self. What you find is this sort of maddening circus of imagery and thought, talk, and feelings. The Buddhists actually have a term for it, especially the sort of modern-day Zen Buddhist writers in Japan and America. They call it the discursive mind. And they say if you want to have peace of nirvana and so forth, what you want to do is kill that thing, basically. And here's a whole book manual of meditation techniques on how to do that. And so the point here is that when you look at your consciousness, you wonder if it really feels a lot like I'm not putting some of these thoughts in. Now, if I do a prayer, for example, I pray to God and I say, I want to have an idea, and so tell me what to do, and all of a sudden, boom, a thought appears in your mind. Well, if that kind of thing can happen, well, what if it can happen the other way, where there can be negative forces out there you've got this reservoir or whatever, where you're sort of a mind's eye watching this reservoir inside your consciousness where everything's coming and going. Well, you wonder who's exactly coming and going, putting things in there and taking things out, and we live in a pretty dark world in a lot of ways, and you wonder how, if the world we live in is set up in ways to open us to certain kinds of spiritual attacks and so forth. I mean, everybody I realize is thinking that, well, this is, old witchcraft talk from 400 years ago.
Not necessarily.
Well, not this audience, but
yeah, exactly.
I mean, you go and look at Big Pharma. I've got that big snake for their, the medical industry. That's the big snake there for their logo, and you've got all the kinds of strange names for drugs and so forth. And I've sort of come to the conclusion from looking carefully, being the September 11 information freak. I've sort of come to the conclusion that from the things I've seen in my life, and if any of you out there really stop, make a point to try to pay attention to the minute details going on in your life from moment to moment, and look at the patterns, clear your mind of all your presumptions and anything you've read in a book or anything, and just stop and observe and put together patterns, you find the most amazing stuff is going on. And I've sort of come to the conclusion that something like illness really is the best explanation for it, is something to do with in the spiritual world.
Jeff, when we come back, I want to talk with you about what you call Mindscreen and have you explain what that is. That's strange. We'll be back. Welcome back to Coast. Jeff Grupp with us, of course. His website is simulationtheory.net. Jeff, what is Mindscreen? What does that mean?
Okay, yeah, George, that's something I was working on heavily when I was teaching at U of M Dearborn.
Right up there on Evergreen Road, huh?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, great place. Okay, so the Mindscreen, that's just let me explain it. Okay, your life consists of looking out at the world at surfaces and colors that are moving around and in predictable ways. And it's just like a TV screen in the mind. And that's really the only way you know anything about the world. Now, the point here is that it's been known for a long time. Thousands, if you buy all the dating that historians have given us, which I know there's some problems with that, but going all the way back to the ancient Greeks and ancient Buddhists and so forth, it's been known that the mind screen has contradictions in it. For example, how do you take a continuous surface. It has a solidity or an extension to it. It has a continuous colorfulness. Well, if you try to describe that in any kind of, like philosophers have been trying to do for more than 2,000 years, you bump into contradiction. Now, take something like a bullet, or let's say an arrow going from the bow to the target. This is a famous example from the philosopher Zeno, ancient Greek. That you try to describe that motion in the simplest terms, just get down to its rudimentary pieces, and it reduces to contradiction. You find that all the simplest aspects of the mind screen reality that we're viewing reality through reduces to contradiction. And it makes you wonder, okay, well, a lot of philosophers have thought, well, it may not exist. It's some kind of dream or something. What I've started to think is that it's actually some sort of computer simulation, because because you can de-simulate from the mind screen also. You can do religious techniques or crystal scrying is another way, which I don't recommend, but that's another way you can the mind screen can actually, it's only one way of seeing reality. You can actually take measures to eliminate it.
I mean, is it conceivable, Jeff, that we truly are living in some kind of digital theater, some digital mind?
Well, I think the digital, if you mean sort of like a colorful, theatrical...
Like a hologram.
That's what everything points to. Now, I'm not just talking about modern science. I'm talking about the basics of philosophy, which are not some kind of a joke that is just for people that are sitting in the closet talking about a bunch of nonsense. No, I mean, it's ultimately anything in science reduces to philosophy. And if you're talking about Einstein's physics and you're talking about cause and effect, well, what's a cause and what's an effect? Those are philosophical conceptions. So, I mean, when you get down to the basics of philosophy, you do seem to run into this issue where everything seems to be a contradiction about our reality we perceive. So, it seems that a good explanation, like the ancient philosopher Plato said, is that we're living in some sort of, it's just sort of like a theater that we're seeing.
Well, let me ask you, does a robot, as they get better and better, does the robot think it's alive? Does it have that kind of thought process?
I don't think so, but I mean, because you've got to be able to create what's called qualia. That's a philosophical term. It's the feeling that you and I both have, George, that we're alive. I feel like I'm a living thing, and my name's Jeff, and I have this feeling that I'm me, and it's alive. It's hard to describe in any more terminology than that. It's not really something our language grasps very well. But I don't think like a pencil or a hunk of metal or a robot has that, at least not now. Maybe there are supernatural beings that can create mind screens to have this feeling of qualia, and they can place it inside a computer or a robot or anything they want to. I mean, it just depends. I mean, if we live in I'm a theist, and so I believe that my mind screen was created by God. And you wonder if that's a pretty cool thing that there can be a mind that can create another mind screen. And you wonder, well, are there other? Because you think about, say, take the Bible for example. It says that we're in God's image. So if God's a creator, we're a creator. You wonder if there's other, so we're a creator to a lesser degree. Well, you wonder if there can be creators out there that can create mind screens or figure out how to, or maybe there's dark entities, fallen angels or something that can do the same, or can hijack mind screens. That's certainly, to go read a book on exorcism or talk to people that have been involved in that, that can happen as well. But something like with crystal scrying is a very interesting. I tried that. That's when you hear about a crystal ball or whatever in cartoons or whatnot. That's a real phenomenon that anybody, I know it's, sort of, what a joke. No, it's the real deal. Just go try it. I did it a couple times years and years ago, back in 07 or 08, and 2 times was all I needed. It really, what you do is you take a crystal, I had I think an amethyst crystal, and you go in just about darkness where you can't see it, and then you stare right to the clearest parts of it, and that's all you do, just stare and make sure you keep that focus. And George, I'm telling you, it's not what you expect. Things happen that you would never believe unless you did it. What happened with me is all of a sudden sort of your whole mind screen kind of turns into fuzz, and you wonder, is this happening because it's dark and I'm just losing the perspective of what's going on because it's so dark where I'm looking here? And I've realized through the years that no, there's other situations. Ever since I did that one time, I've recognized there's other situations where the mind can look at a glass of water or can look into a mirror. There's certain kinds of light that the human mind can look through, and it's almost like it can do things to your mind to break down your consciousness and break down the mind screen and so forth. But when I did crystal scrying, it was a very incredibly negative experience where it really felt like I did it right before going to bed, and I had horrific, incredibly bad dreams that I've never had anything like before. And then, I thought, it's a coincidence, so I did it the next night, and then the same thing happened, and I said, okay, that's enough. I don't like where this is going. Then I've read in books on it, actually, about how some people in secret societies have purported to routinely told people that they were involved in crystal scrying a lot, and they would do it, and then they would feel something was hijacking their consciousness, and then that was the end. Then they said it was their consciousness was hijacked because of the crystal scrying. I've read multiple people in secret societies giving that kind of a testimony, and that's what it felt like with me. It felt like something was trying to get in and take over, and it made me think, okay, so the mind screen is something that's not real stable, and I don't know how much of it is, any person out there. It's not real clear how much of your mind screen is actually owned by you. There might be, like we were saying earlier, there might be things being placed in it. If we're living in a computer simulation, then the idea is that somewhere or something is helping to assist and create this simulation of your life from moment to moment. And if you look inside your consciousness and you're not in that much control of it, and we realize that the outside world, you have a real hard time describing, even modern physics is having a hard time describing how the outside world we experience can actually exist, because the whole thing doesn't make any sense when you juxtapose it with the quantum realm that it supposedly comes from. So you wonder, where is all this imagery and so forth coming from? And so the idea is that the mind screen is something that's unstable, and it has a very strange nature to it, and I wonder where the whole thing comes from.
Well, let's take God out, Jeff, for a moment. Let's take God out of the equation. When you think about the simulation, that we might be all just simulated, not that we're not real.
Simulants.
A lot of people, are having a difficult time trying to just ascertain how they even got here in the first place. So let's assume for a moment we are some kind of simulation. What happens when somebody, whoever's in charge up there, clicks off the program? Are we all gone?
Well, it depends where you fall. If you think that there's a simulator, that is it. Are we just sort of some kid in the future that's on his lunch break at work, and he decided to make a little simulation in his computer, and it just lasts for a minute or two? We experience it as billions of years.
Yes, because time doesn't mean anything to us, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on where you're coming. I mean, our universe seems to have a lot of darkness in it, so you wonder exactly who's pulling the strings in. Yeah, but if somebody flicked it off, I mean, if the simulationist theory is correct, I mean, with any kind of principle like that, if you've been created by another mind rather than evolved or something, so your existence is dependent on that other consciousness, then I think if they want to, they can shut you off if they feel like it. Maybe that kind of stuff goes on.
Maybe it does. When people die, maybe that's what happens to them.
Oh, there's an interesting, I've been reading a lot about deathbed visions, about how a lot of people on their deathbed, or maybe even like a week or two before, start seeing relatives that have died, and they know about certain people that have died that they're not supposed to have died, and they start seeing things. We've had a number of people in our family that start talking about, I'm going on a trip with Grandpa.
Boy,
what are you talking about? Grandpa died.
That's the trip.
Yeah, and then they die. And then they start packing their suitcases and all this. It's almost sort of beautiful if you want the truth.
What do you think dying is?
I really think deathbed visions, George, I think really show us there's an afterlife.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily empirical information, but man, it's pretty close because I'm seeing people in my family doing it. And you just take one more step. There's people that writing books out there talking about how, there's the soldier that was away at war and his wife had a baby or had twins and one died and nobody ever told him and he didn't know, for some reason didn't want to hurt his feelings or whatever. And then he's on his deathbed, 49 years later, and then he's sitting there saying, "Oh, my 2 children are here to see me as I pass to the other realm." And everybody's like, "Wait, 2 children? What are you talking about? You've got 1 kid." He's like, "No, there's 1 here," and then he points like to the top corner of the room or something.
Where the soul was of the other one.
Yeah, he says, "Oh, I have 2," and everybody's like, "Whoa, how did he know that?" From what I'm seeing, I think that kind of stuff is real. And if so, I mean, how are we going to deny afterlife? I mean, we came from somewhere. There's some point. I don't think there's no point. Our mind screens are supernatural entities. They're made out of contradiction. So that tells me that how do you make something out of a contradiction? Well, you got to be a supernatural designer of our supernatural consciousness to do that. So there's got to be some bigger point here. My ultimate theory when I was working on simulation theory is that the reason that we are here, this isn't, I don't know how wow this conclusion is, but I mean, we're here to generate spiritual ecstasy. I realize that humans are not doing a very good job at that worldwide, but that's kind of just the idea that's contained in the religions, that like Christianity, you're here to give intimacy, you're here to be a being to love God. In Buddhism, you're here to realize your true self, which is nirvana. I mean, those are, love and nirvana, those are types of spiritual bliss. So,
were we created by a creator?
The mind screen sure seems to point to that because, well, not just for the ordinary reasons, which I'm sure all your listeners know, like such as nobody can figure out how to describe how the mind screen evolved, how your subjective consciousness evolved, or nobody can even forget that. I mean, nobody can even define what what a mind screen is. And when you look at it, it's sort of made of different stuff. It seems supernatural. I mean, when I look out at the world, I see bricks and all these colors and stuff. But when I look inside my consciousness, there's something like a feeling. And what in the world is that? I don't see that out in the world. It seems to defies explanation, defies definition. And some of those feelings, George, can be really spectacular. And you can do religious techniques to generate feelings that are just downright spiritual ecstasy. So it seems to me that we've been the better explanation to say that we've evolved. There's not even a missing link that anybody can find to bridge the human-looking skull to the monkey-looking skull. Maybe they will someday, but I think the better explanation right now is that we are designed. I mean, you've got all this stuff, the golden ratio and Zipf's law, and there's all these signs out there that there's, numerology is the best example of all. There's a lot of codes and mathematical things going on in reality that sure don't look like an undirected universe. They look like a designed computer program. Really, numerology is the best example of all.
Tell me a little bit about that thought, numerology, and how that ties into this.
Yeah, I think that so we're living in this Mindscreen simulation, and that doesn't mean
I can't rule that out. You might be right.
Well, I don't necessarily mean something like the Matrix, where we're actually all sitting in a bathtub on orbiting a quasar 49 billion light years away, or something. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. It could be something completely. It could just mean that the reality we see of the mind screen with all its colors and shapes and stuff moving around through our daily lives, it might actually be the case that that's just only half real, and there's actually a more real reality, something like maybe an electrical field that it permeates everything, and which is to have awareness of it, fill one with great joy. But I forgot what was your question again?
The numerology. How does that tie into this?
Well, it seems to me, from my experience, I was a Buddhist for 20 years, and
20 years? Wow.
Yeah, from about 92 to I've kind of stopped when I became a grad student in 02. I kind of or not 20 years. What am I saying here? 92. 10 years. Sorry. And
you lost 10.
Yeah. It's late at night. But yeah, I remember that I started to notice a lot of when you're a Buddhist, your consciousness really kind of becomes heightened. You really become aware of a lot of stuff. And I started to notice. I got into numerology kind of because of that time, because I would notice all these interesting quote coincidences unquote, which I realized later aren't. They're just sort of this mathematical matrix we're in called you can call it numerology. And it seems that the mathematical process of the Mindscreen is numerology. I realize that this isn't discussed in universities and blah, 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 but, who cares? I mean, it is, all you need to do is go pick up a numerology book, and, man, you're just go read about your birthday, the qualities of a person on your birthday, and you're just blown away. You can't believe the similarities. So I think I've just actually discovered somebody else, I'm sure, has thought about it before me, but I think I've kind of bumped into a numerological principle that's not really in the text and the numerology books yet. I call it two theory, which I can explain in a second. But it seems to me that numerology is if you're really paying attention, it's so powerful that it has to be the real mathematical system which describes Mindscreen mechanics. And it doesn't really work like a map. Like the ordinary mathematics, like calculus, will map how the cannonball goes through the air, its trajectory from one ship to the other as the Spanish try to blow up the French ship or something like that. Talking about old days from Isaac Newton times when gravitation was invented, keyword there, invented. I forgot what I was going to say. It's too late, so late in the evening here.
I got to give you a little coffee or something, huh?
Yeah, I've been working I've got.
Well, we were talking about you being a Buddhist.
Oh yeah. Okay, so when I was
thank God my memory's still going, huh? We'd really be up a creek.
Oh yeah, serious. Well, I've been on like 2 hours of sleep a night for a couple weeks.
Why?
Because I'm on this unbelievable new research. But so I would notice in times of when I was really productive with Buddhism, and I would notice that the Mindscreen kind of desimulates, and you sort of witness like a spiritual ecstasy, almost like an electrical field that you can kind of faintly feel and see all over the place. You can call that nirvana, and read books by Buddhist Logic 1 and 2 by Trubetsky, famous book. He describes all about what that field looks like. And I started to think, well, okay, so I've got these interesting mathematical patterns which only occur during Mindscreen states, but during spiritual ecstasies, they seem to go away to some. They seem to apply only to those Mindscreen scenarios, not to the desimulated consciousness of the spiritual ecstasy. And so then I was thinking that perhaps the idea is that numerology is a mathematics not of mapping reality, it's more of meaning and the shapes of numbers and so forth. So in other words, if you're a number 11 is your birthday, that gives that means something to your consciousness. It gives you certain qualities.
Hold on, Jeff. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. I want you to get into this multi-dimensions that could be out there and what that means to us. Plus, we're going to take an hour of phone calls with you on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. Jeff Grupp with us. We're talking about all his work, and it is incredible work indeed. Let's talk about, are we really living in a digital world, a hologram? Are we made up? Think about all that, or other dimensions. But we'll get to that in your calls in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Welcome back. Jeff Grupp with us. We'll get to your calls in a second. Jeff, this truly is bizarre to just think of the possibilities that we're in some kind of digital world on a chip, a hologram, that we're just simply not real. We think we're real. We feel pain. We get sick. We die. We have emotion. But what if we're not? I've always thought we were a dream.
I mean, it feels like you're in a dream a lot of times. I mean, like I was saying earlier, I've gotten, I'm little sleep, and yeah, it's real easy to all of a sudden feel like you're walking through a dream. But I mean, even spiritual exercises will do that, where that's kind of the point of a lot of meditations and prayer techniques in the various religions, is to try to get you to see that the Mindscreen reality is really just kind of a dream. And really, it's not the happiest one in a lot of ways either. There's another way to see the world. And that's, I kind of just call that the desimulated, opposite of simulated consciousness, and that is the one where religions worldwide talk about ubiquitously that's the one where not only is it the happy realm, but it is spectacularly ecstatic. So, I mean, you're talking about, if we live in a computer hologram. Well, how else do you make the whole numerology thing work? I realize that a lot of people out there will think numerology is just a joke, but it is an empirical, I don't know if I want to say science, it's called empirical mathematical study. It's just one that is unfortunately being ignored by academia. But how are you going to make numerology work where everybody's coded by their names and their birthdays, and there's a whole lot of other coding going on too. Events are coded and in different ways and so forth, all with numerological rules. How do you make that? Sounds a whole lot to me like a computer program. Wouldn't you say?
I sure would. And Jeff, but here's the thing: there's got to be somebody, something controlling this. Somebody's got to be at the helm somewhere. I think, don't you?
Well, there's that. Excuse me. There's the free will concept. We're supposed to have some control of it, but as we were talking about the mind earlier, I don't know how much control we have over the mind. The way free will works is you take that discursive mind that we were describing earlier, and you try to impose your will on parts of it, but man, you only can do that for a second. Then you get tired out or distracted, or 15 other thoughts flood into your mind that you didn't seem to put in there that sort of tamper with everything going on, and you're trying to control it. I mean, so I don't know. It's the best there's a lot of. It seems to me, George, if the computer simulated reality is real, probably best not to apply it to current day. I mean, we want to use the current day computers as a framework to try to, hard drive software and all that. But, it probably is real. It may not even be something that's made out of metal pieces or something, whatever the computer is. It could be a supernatural computer of some sort, a spiritual computer that we're all stuck at. That's kind of what Plato was talking about.
We're in an old IBM computer, Jeff.
Yeah, Apple Works or something.
Who knows? I mean, I mean, look, practically one would say, come on now, that's crazy. It doesn't exist like that.
Well,
it's not true. But
we're talking about the evidence.
We're talking about the evidence. Absolutely. Let's grab some calls for you. Then we'll talk some more. They're rolling in here for you. Let's go to Mayat in New York City. Welcome to the program. Hi, Mayat.
Yes, good morning, gentlemen. I tell you, this whole show is, from beginning to end, is just so intriguing. Gina is a gem, and I'm just so glad I got in. Jeff, you are awesome, and I'm looking forward to your information. Now, I have a 3-parter, as usual, and I'll hang up and listen to the air. Do you have your pen handy?
I do.
Go ahead. We're both writing, because Jeff might forget.
I'm writing them down.
The first part is because I'm someone, I think, well, let me comment that I think you made your mistake studying Buddhism when you didn't have the theist. You didn't see the netra, which I use, how I call God in terms of ancient Kemetic Egyptian. You didn't see the most high part. But I want to know what you think about monkey mind, because as someone who reads a lot in Buddhism and Taoism, I think that says it more than the term discursive mind. I'd like to know, for those of us who see it more as a philosophy and read a lot but haven't been able to really get into the meditation practice, I want some suggestions and some authors, including spelling Zabatsky's name. And lastly, Jeff, I want you to connect this to quantum physics concept of non-locality, and in other words, also flesh it out in terms of the present age that we live in. I need you to flesh it out in terms of the transhumanism coming down the pike and all the technology which is changing who we are seemingly as beings. And I know that's a lot on your plate. That's 4 questions. If you got it, I'll hang up and listen over the air.
Awesome.
Give us one good answer, Jeffrey, and we'll call it all 4.
Well, Buddhism actually made me become a theist. I think, I've thought often that Buddhists are missing the whole. They're kind of writing from it. Nirvana is a theistic sort of concept. And as far as non-locality goes, that's that's the idea where you've got 2 particles in different places and they can interact with each other. You do this experimentally. They interact with each other without any causation. And I mean that tells us. I mean, somebody try to get a philosophical conceptualization for how that works, and I mean, that's sort of on the line of how there's science can tell us the map, but we need to know. I mean, we need to get into the spirituality and the philosophical aspects to know why everything's going on, and non-locality is a spectacular example of that.
And when you deal with the unusual, the supernatural, the what's way out there, physicists, Michio Kaku, have come up with string theory, multi-universes. Those could be very possible, too, could they not?
Well, yeah, they're philosophical concepts. So, I mean, they're like string theory is not verified yet, and it could be. I mean, but I don't know. I kind of shy away. String theory seems to have some philosophical problems with me. I mean, for example, they were first talking about everything's made out of one-dimensional strings, and I said, okay, well, there is really no such thing as a one-dimensional string. That's kind of a zero. If you look at a one-dimensional string from its endpoint or at any of the sides, it's invisible because it has no dimension. You have to get to 2 dimensions before you see anything. So it's kind of the same. String theory was supposed to come along to replace the point particle theory. Everybody in quantum physics, well, a lot of people were saying, particles are points, they have no size, and everybody's uncomfortable with that, thinking, well, how can you make up a world when everything has 0 size? How do you get 0, 0, 0 equals 1? And so string theory is supposed to avoid that, but they start off with the one-dimensional idea, which really didn't help because you still don't have a surface for things to interact and build up. Then they came out with a two-dimensional thing, two-dimensional sheets, and with that that's more problematical. Even then, you've got an infinitely thin sheet that supposedly has a surface. Well, somebody's going to have to explain. I mean, this is all Euclidean stuff from 2,000 years ago. That I don't know. I just have philosophical problems with a lot of it.
Well, and I think she wanted a spelling of Madame Blavatsky. So let me spell it.
Oh, no, Trubetsky, he wrote Buddhist Logic.
Who the heck is he?
Oh, yeah, he's a famous Buddhist. It'll take him. I forgot.
Well, let me spell Blavatsky for her anyway. By that time, you'll get the other one. It's Blavatsky.
Okay, I got a spelling right here.
And you got one too. Go ahead.
It's Stchberbatsky. How
do you pronounce that?
Read Volume 1. It's a spectacular description of, Buddhist, Buddhist atomism, which is another term for nirvana. Good stuff.
She knows her stuff, doesn't she?
Oh, yeah, well, coast to coast audience, man.
They are PhDs. Chris is in Buffalo, east of the Rockies. Chris, has the snow finally all melted?
Yeah, we're over here in the snow belt.
They had a pile there a couple of weeks ago that was still there.
Yeah, well, I listened to your weather, man. Last year, I go to Cleveland every night. It was 18 storms. This year was 24.
I know, way up, and we're not done.
Yeah, so we're hoping for something better. And I got to tell you this, George, my dad passed away here. I lost him a few years ago, and 24 years we hauled steel to Detroit, and yeah, I guess you're from Detroit.
I sure am, and I lost my dad a couple of years ago too.
Well, I got to tell you this. I'd always tell Dad, "Oh God, it's that guy. It's that George guy." When I was on. Well, man, I sure love you. You sure make the nights go by.
Thank you.
I want to lay in on this. My 83-year-old neighbor, he's very ill, and he's giving me all these books about against the church and all this, and how do you know if God's real? Well, it's going to take just a second here. Years ago in 1990, I was a bad guy, drugs and alcohol, and I went into a rehab center, and believe it or not, it was a Christian rehab center, and I had my doubts about Jesus, but I know there's a God. I'm not one of these guys that. Here's my problem with Jesus. I believe that at the end of it all, God, this omnipresent God, Almighty God, is not going to say, "Oh, because I live by the reservation. Oh, you're an Indian, you can't come in here. You're a Muslim, you can't." But anyways, that's the way I believe, So I'm going into all the books right now. I'm not a real educated guy. I'm a little nervous here. But anyways,
no, you're doing well.
I was in this rehab for 14 months. It was a Christian rehab. David Wilkerson was his name in 1992, and we were 3 stories in the bottom of this house we all lived in. There's 12 men for 10 months and got rehabilitated. And he said, "Oh, do you want the Holy Spirit to come on you?" This is why I wanted to ask your guest there. He said, "If God's real, you can ask for the Holy Spirit." And it was like how can I explain it? When my daughter was born in Houston, we had a hurricane down there. It was a mellow hurricane coming all the way through the sky like a meteorite, and it came through the house. And by God, it landed on me, and I'll never forget that to the day. And I can speak in tongues. Does it help me? I don't think so. But it was real, and it really happened.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So I was going to ask your friend Jeff, has he ever experienced anything like that, or have you ever heard of anything like that?
Specific, say in one sentence, are you talking about the Holy Spirit?
Yeah. It actually came and it fell on me and three other guys that were sitting there in the bottom of that room.
Well, okay. Man, I can't believe you asked that. Yeah, I became a Christian on April 16th.
Something happened to you, Jeff. Something made you become a Christian, right?
Yeah, my wife got in a car crash with all four kids in our Jeep on August 16th. Nobody was hurt. There was a series of events that happened that started in February and terminated at the point of the accident, which showed me, and they're kind of on the order of what the caller is asking. I was seeing some things, and I thought I was going crazy. And I told myself I wasn't going to talk about this on the air ever, but he asked, so I have to answer.
Yes, you do.
I can't lie. It showed me clear as day that, I understand all the contradictions or paradoxes of Christianity. God creates beings to be tortured in hell. I get it, but none of that matters to me anymore. I saw what I saw, and I have no choice. This is where my life's going now, and I'm firmly in it. And I've never, you know what, George, I've never been happier. This is the best point of my life so far, and I did not expect that. And, this has all kind of blindsided me. So yeah, I did witness some things like that, and there's no messing around. It's real. That's the real world.
Well, thank God, Jeff, that your family's not hurt. My God.
Well, there's a reason. Well, it was because I don't want to get too weird on everybody, but the supernatural world was at play, and that it would have been one of those crashes that didn't make sense that nobody got hurt. It was on a highway. People going, we think it was a teenager that was texting, we believe. She said she was distracted by her radio, but we believe it was because she was, we just let it go. I'm not going to fight against it, but it was one of those that it didn't make any sense that that a couple of my kids weren't killed. It was really, I sat and stared at the wall for about a month without exaggeration, trying to digest this whole thing that happened over those months and then terminated with the accident and, try to figure out why, and so rearrange my whole consciousness.
Let's go to Lisa in San Diego right before the break. Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi.
Hi there.
Hi. I was wondering, I had a question about when you were talking about when you're praying and asking things and who is it that comes in from the outside that tells you information that you seemingly don't have. I was wondering about how that contradicts with the near-death experiences that people talk about when they have the near-death experiences and they realize that all knowledge is within us. So how does that work with that? Like, if it's the negative, that our shadow, or how does that correlate?
Yeah, Plato talked about that, about how we have this infinite well of knowledge. You have to make a decision on what you think's going on. It could be the case that you're just tapping into, our minds are really something amazing. Go take a look at a hypnagogic state. With that state between waking, as you're falling asleep, between waking and sleeping. Watch your mind real carefully, and you'll see it gets really smarter when you're in that state. And you're saying, where did all this brilliance come from? Then you can also go in the shamanic ritual and eat the peyote, and you find your mind is just electrified with all this. So much more intelligent. You're thinking, well, why was I so unintelligent in my normal life compared to this? Where did it all come from? Did it all of a sudden gain this from the plant or whatever? And it seems like it was in you already. But if you see things, if you're doing prayers or something, and you do a very specific prayer, and then all of a sudden something happens, or say you're praying for knowledge or something, and it pops in your mind 5 seconds later, you have to make a decision if you think that was, that your mind just conjured it up, or if there's a simulator or a, supernatural creator or something that put it in there since you asked. That's kind of, there's laws in the spiritual world in my, well, I mean, it's not just my opinion. It's, if you read books by exorcists and so forth, they'll say the same thing. You ask for things, and things are made. There's rituals, and the way spiritual beings talk to each other, it's usually not by verbal language. It's usually by sort of a mind-to-mind talk. Like if you're in a shamanic state, in a psychedelic state, you might, see an alien or something in a peyote ritual, and then you get out of the trance and say, "Wow, the alien told me this," and you're like, "Wait a minute, the alien wasn't moving its mouth. We were just kind of. I didn't hear it talk either. I just knew what it was." Its consciousness was doing, and it knew what mine was doing, and it's a different kind of communication there. So you have to kind of just piece through all this and put it all together. It's like a big puzzle, the whole spiritual world, and everybody really just has to dig into it on their own. And I've gotten to where I have through this. Really, it's been quite a journey through my 44 years, and you have to make your own decisions on. I'm a simulation theorist, and I think there is a consciousness that created everything. So I'm a diehard theist. I think I'm obviously I mix that with Christianity. So that's just where I'm at. From what I've seen, that's what's brought me to this point.
The big question, of course, Jeffrey, is what is that individual like, that creator? Is it the godlike state?
That is the question.
Who knows? Who knows? Stay with us. We're going to come back in a moment here on Coast to Coast AM. We'll take some final phone calls. By the way, like us on Facebook, like so many people do, and follow us on Twitter. Lots of information on Twitter these days that we keep you updated on, so make sure you're part of that. And we're on Instagram now, too. We'll send an occasional picture or two of things that are going on. Well, I continue, as I mentioned, with my Magical Mystery Tour this year. Wow, very busy. Off to Edinburgh, Texas, for a major UFO event and paneling invited there by the city of Edinburgh. They've got this event going annually, so we will be there. Dave Schrader manning the desk for us, so make sure you're part of that program with him. And welcome back. Jeff Grupp with us. We're going to go to the phones. Let's go to Ryder in Kansas City, Missouri. Hey, Ryder, go ahead.
Hey, I'm going to try and keep this kind of brief.
Okay.
Listen to the show a lot. It's the first time I've called because he said something earlier, your guest, about when he was talking about negative ecstasy and like these weird thoughts and everything else like that.
Yeah.
When I was in the Marine Corps, me and some others stopped a mass shooting on base that a lot of people never heard of, and it ended up going from a mass shooting to just a suicide. And even before that and around that and everything else now, when I'm holding a gun, which I used to do for work, and I'm a gun collector, I just get these weird, like, thoughts, ideations, and stuff like that of suicide. And I don't want to do it, obviously, because I'm still here, but I still get these, like, compulsions, especially when I'm working with a gun in public. Like, what would happen if I just, like, shot myself in front of all these people at Applebee's? And they're really dark, like, horrible thoughts that I don't want to have. Is there a way to control these things? And obviously, with all the gun grabbers like Feinstein, I'm a pretty heavy target for them. I don't want to lose my guns because I'm still an avid sports shooter. I'm also a hunter and everything else like that. So I don't really want to go to a psychiatrist or anything like that where Feinstein's going to be like, oh, this guy, take him away. And I'll go ahead and take my answers off the air.
Huh, that's really interesting.
So he's got these desires, Jeff, but he feels like he's not going to go through with it.
It's like you should look up, research uncontrolled thoughts. There's a whole psychology books written on it. It's really, I don't know if I would necessarily think of it as weird. I mean, I think everybody has this to some degree. I know that I've had a number of people I'm associated with that they would get around knives and they would be like, I got to get me away from the knives. I feel different around them or something. I know that when I hold a hammer and I'm around my kids, I have to put it down. I can't. It's just too weird to be holding a hammer around my kids because it's a weapon, and I just don't feel right. I just have to put it on top of the refrigerator, get it out of my sight or something. And I know that some people on antidepressants have a lot of trouble with around knives and guns and hammers and stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe I think that when he said what should I do? I mean, the obvious answer to me is start some spiritual practice, whether it's shamanism or Buddhism or Christianity. Really do it. Don't just do it for fun. I mean, that usually it's spirituality that cleans out the mind real nicely.
Yeah, but, I'm wondering if, he needs to really get some kind of assistance or help. What do you think?
I'm taking from what you said, George, that you might not agree with what I'm saying. I'm not the expert on this. I could be dead wrong in everything I just said, and I don't want to say something which leads to violence or something. So I don't know. I just, the only thing I have is what I said just a minute ago.
Yeah.
What do you think, George?
I think he should, for his own sake.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Ryder, I think you should. Just, they're not going to lock you up or anything like that, but if you have these thoughts, then you have these tendencies, and I think it would be safe for you and the people you care about and the people you may not even know to go in and get something done. Let's go to the Bronx. Hey, Joe, you're up.
Hey, George, how you doing?
Good, Joseph.
I wanted to ask Jeff, now, you mentioned the Mindscreen. How does that physically manifest itself? You mentioned colors and shapes. Is there a soundtrack to the Mindscreen? And is it similar? Are those colors similar to phosphemes? And also, I have another question. Can you elaborate on that research you alluded to that you're doing that's giving you only 2 hours of sleep per night?
It's pretty heavy. Well, as far as the Mindscreen, it's like a movie theater that has feeling inside your consciousness, and it mostly goes out of control, but you can take your free will, and do things to try to control it as best you can, but usually it's kind of running out of control, and you can do exercises to kind of subdue it or even kill it, spiritual exercises. But as far as the new research I'm doing, do you want me to go into that, George, or do you want to?
Yeah, no, please go ahead.
Okay, because this is the biggest stuff I've ever come across in my life, and it's enough to keep me from. I slept an hour and a half last night, and I'm all the way up till 4:45 in the morning now. And that's. But anyways, it has to do with the sky. There's this. Your listeners can take this however they want. And I'll be very brief and get right to the point and bring up two pieces of evidence. But the sky is a dome, from what I'm finding. And is that just a theory? No, it's go in your backyard.
You're not the first to say this,
No, I know, but I know, but I understand people's reactions when you say that.
Oh, yeah, but
go in your backyard and take some photographs of the sun. Take it, maybe 60 degrees off the horizon down to 30. Take maybe 4 or 5 and put them next to each other on your computer and draw some perspective lines, and you'll notice that the sun is getting smaller as it moves across the sky, and it perfectly follows perspective lines. What in the world is that? That means the sun is just a little bit off the horizon and is moving away from you. It's impossible on the heliocentric model of the solar system that the sun is moving away and losing 30% of its size in just a small arc across the sky. Now that's the small piece of information. And notice it's something that all of you can do yourself. It's not some theory or something that you can't verify from NASA or something like that. The astronomers must be making a mistake somewhere in their theories about how far the sun is. Somehow or another, because what I just said is an empirical experiment that overrides any theories. Now that's the small game. The big game is the following. Nobody's really looking at the sun because the sun is too bright. So we don't tend to look in that direction. But man, George, if you do and you get, special lenses or goggles or cameras or something, you see the most spectacular. The sun is reflecting off of a dome ceiling, and so is the moon, which somebody's going to have to explain that one to me.
Well, now what about this incredible New Horizons mission to Pluto?
Well, hang on. Let me say one more sentence. Go look up sundog on one word, and you'll see that's a reflection the sun makes off the sky. And go get a glass bowl. I just made a documentary on this on my website. Go to the intellectual stuff section on my website and go scroll all the way down where it says the Teticism. And you can reproduce this reflection in a glass dome with a lighter. I made a documentary on this. I actually just finished it, and I show this. It's an hour and 40 minutes. I go into a whole bunch of things, and I've tried to come up with any other way you can make this reflection. The only way you can do it is by holding a lighter on a certain orientation inside of a glass dome, which perfectly mimics this sundog structure that that the sun does. And there's a whole bunch of other things in this documentary I made, which it appears the sky is a ceiling, and we're living in some kind of big room. It's really unbelievable. But anyway, you were saying about Pluto. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm going to make a second documentary, which this first one is about the sky and the sun and a little bit about the moon. I'm going to make a second one about the planet.
Well, if we're enclosed in a dome, like you say, and some others have said that, what does that mean to you?
On the internet right now.
What does that mean to you?
It means that
somebody's encased us. Right?
It means that it means to me, George, that you can have two theories about a single phenomenon. Like take plate tectonics versus expanding Earth theory. Both of those really kind of quite well explain the surface structures of the Earth, but they're completely different theories. Well, you've got Big Bang cosmology and gravitation, which explains the sky, and it's a pretty good model. The gravitation describes solar system formation and galaxy formation very well. But there's another model that's out there, which I'm referring to, and I describe in this documentary, which really is superior, and it's the dome world is empirical. It's an empirical study, and it actually checks out better than Big Bang cosmology, and it's quite extraordinary. It's really a restart for my life. So anyway.
All right, back to the phones. Bob's in St. Louis. Welcome to the program, Bob. Good to have you with us. Go ahead.
Yeah, George, Jeff, I've had something strange happen tonight, which actually made me tune into you guys, and then you're talking interdimensional, which made me kind of want to call in to ask about it.
Sure.
I was driving, and about 2 in the morning, my phone starts ringing, and I look down on the caller ID, and I see my name and the call, and at first I thought, well, it's my dad, who had the same name, but then I looked, his picture shows up on my phone, and I looked, and it was my phone number calling me.
Whoa.
I have a headset, and I grabbed for the headset to answer it, and then I thought, do I answer it? Do I not answer it? And usually it rings 4 times, and then it'll go to voicemail. On the third ring, when I went to push the headset on, it just stopped ringing.
Huh.
And then I just looked at it, and I thought it for a second. Well, maybe my wife called me, and it just rang in with my caller ID by accident. So I called her, and she asked me, why am I waking her up at 2 in the morning? And I said, did you call me? And she's like, no, why? And I'm like, well, my phone rang, and the caller ID was me and my phone number. And then she's like, it wasn't me. I'm going back to bed. Don't want to hear about it. She hung up. And then, strangely, I just decided, well, let me check my call log. I looked at it again, and there was an incoming call from my phone. So I just hit the thing to recall it, and it goes straight to voicemail. And I'm like, that was a weird kind of iffy feeling. And I thought to myself, I hesitated. Do I answer or do I not answer? And because everything you see, like in the movies, they say if you see yourself, or you touch yourself, or talk to yourself, something could happen and change. And it was just kind of weird. And when I got to Kansas City, I talked to the guy there at the terminal, and then I showed him my phone, and he looked at it, and he said, yeah, you definitely called yourself, and, a missed call from you, so that's kind of weird, And when I tuned in, you're to interdimensional, and it just made me want to call in and ask if something like that has ever happened before to you or anything.
Not to me. What about you, Jeffrey?
It seems like there's always weird things happening.
That's strange. First thing, I'd call, if you could, Bob, call your phone company this morning when they are there and find out if a phone can accidentally call yourself. That is weird.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I don't know, all these gadgets we have are
too many.
Taking over, George.
A little at a time. Now, see, here's the thing. Had he answered, what if he talked to himself?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Ooh.
Like in the parallel universe
or
something.
Bob talks to Bob. That would be something. Let's go to Lawrence, Kansas. First-time caller is Stephen. Stephen, good morning. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. How you doing?
We're great, thanks.
Great. I just wanted to say something real quick and ask a real deep question.
Sure thing.
I spent 8 years in a Texas prison for something I didn't do, and I went to sleep with your voice every night, man. I just really appreciate you comforting me, man.
I'm glad you got out, Stephen.
It was a real tough time in my life, and there's guys there that just really they stay up all night and just really listen. Anyway, I had a lot of time. In those 8 years, I did a lot of college work and a lot of study. and got degrees and then ended up
Good for you.
doing music and a lot of stuff. But this is the question. If we change the values and the parameters of our senses, how would our perceptions change, like through genetics, if we gave our eyes the senses of a cat or an animal, for example? How would our perceptions change, and what would we see?
Interesting question. I think we would have a totally different perception, Jeff, of everything.
Yeah, new perception is new reality. I mean, if somebody comes out with a new concept, and the world can change, and everybody sees it through a different lens. I mean, and new senses can do that too. I mean, you can do the shamanic ritual and eat the peyote button, and all of a sudden you realize those same senses you've been using your whole life can see a whole lot more, and you wonder, why didn't they see all this stuff before? And you realize that all this new perception just expands your knowledge base in reality.
It sure does. Jeff, we're almost out of time. One, thanks for coming on. Two, why did it take you 4 years to come back?
Yeah, George, I love your audience. So I was sitting here on the phone thinking, I forgot how much I love the Coast to Coast audience.
You know, we never even had time to talk about your thoughts about Nibiru.
Well, that's
huge. That's part of your dome thing, isn't it?
Well, what this double sun is it's reflecting. The sun is reflecting off that sky ceiling, and you can reproduce that. So you got to watch this documentary I made. I go through all the mechanics.
And how do you find that? How do you find the documentary?
The simplest way would go to. I've got another web URL that'll go right to this page of my site. It's just called www.flathead.science, and it's the first YouTube video on there, and it's called The Heavens. And yeah, it's a real. It's really got me all summer. I've been freaking out over this one.
Okay, my friend.
There's a lot more to it.
Be safe. I'm glad your family's okay from that accident.
Yeah, thanks, George. I thank God every day.
Oh my gosh. Okay, Jeff. It turns you into a believer. That's for sure. And you know what? That would happen to anybody, to be sure. Don't forget, folks, I've got to be off to Edinburgh, Texas for a major event tomorrow. Then I'm in Toronto next weekend, but I'm going to be squeezed into St. Louis, so I'll be doing my shows out of there. Gosh, I hope I don't have to go to Ferguson, Missouri, but I will if I have to. For Dan Galante, Gina Salvati, Tom Danheiser, Lisa Lyon, Lex Lonehood, Sean Ladouceur, Stephanie Smith, Chris Boros, and George Knapp, I'm George Norrie, somewhere out there on Coast to Coast AM. We'll see you on our next edition. Until then, be safe, everyone.